deep beneath the endless, blistering dunes of the Sahara Desert. A secret of truly terrifying proportions is currently being buried by the very authorities tasked with protecting our history. Recently, highly detailed LiDAR satellite images of the Central Sahara region were quietly and systematically erased from every major global mapping platform. There was no public announcement, no press release, and no explanation given for the sudden blackout of millions of square miles of barren desert. For decades, we have been comfortably taught by mainstream geology that the Sahara was once a lush, vibrant, tropical rainforest, a prehistoric paradise of biodiversity that was slowly transformed into a dry wasteland by entirely natural climate shifts. We believed it was a simple story of changing weather patterns, but this comforting textbook narrative is about to be violently shattered. Months ago, a classified multinational geological drilling operation was initiated under the guise of deep-crust mineral exploration. The objective was to penetrate the Earth's crust deeper than ever before in this region. As their heavy industrial drills plunged downwards, cutting through layers of ancient sand and compacted sandstone, reaching a staggering depth of exactly 3 miles beneath the shifting surface. The machinery suddenly ground to a violent halt. They had collided with an impenetrable physical barrier. Seismic readings indicated that it was not a layer of solid granite or bedrock, nor was it a dense pocket of compressed subterranean gas. Instead, when the diamond-tipped drill bits were pulled back to the surface, they brought up fragments of something that should not exist. They had struck a colossal, intertwining network of fossilized tree roots, a biological structure so incredibly massive and dense that it defies all known laws of terrestrial botany. And what is even more chilling to the researchers on site, these ancient petrified roots are actively emitting a strange, pulsating form of invisible radiation. Why would a desolate region, seemingly devoid of any modern life, be suddenly designated as a top-secret military quarantine zone? What exactly is hiding 3 miles below the scorching surface of the world's largest desert? And why are the world's most brilliant scientific minds completely terrified of what it ultimately means for the human race? Every living plant on planet Earth relies on a fundamental, unbreakable biological process to survive: the delicate and ancient mechanism of photosynthesis, which absolutely requires the life-giving light of our sun. Without solar energy, terrestrial plant life perishes. But the gargantuan organism discovered suspended beneath the Sahara does not need the sun. In fact, it seems to have thrived in a state of complete and utter darkness, feeding heavily on something far more sinister and powerful. When anomalous, glowing core samples of the root system were secretly transported in lead-lined containers to underground laboratories in Europe for advanced isotopic analysis, the preliminary results sent silent shock waves through the tight-knit scientific community. Under the lenses of electron microscopes, the cellular structure of these massive fossilized roots revealed a highly complex organic polymer, a synthetic, like biological material with a molecular density that simply does not exist anywhere else in the natural evolutionary record of our planet. It was harder than steel, yet possessed the porous flexibility of living tissue. But the true, unadulterated horror emerged when quantum physicists measured the isotopic signatures embedded deep within the petrified wood fibers. The cellular walls were completely saturated with deadly, heavy radioactive isotopes, specifically showing off the chart's concentrations of plutonium-244 and uranium-235. Under normal, observable circumstances, these heavy radioactive elements would instantly destroy any known organic tissue, tearing apart fragile DNA structures at the quantum level and melting biological matter into a toxic, lifeless sludge. Yet instead of being annihilated by the lethal ionizing radiation, evolutionary biologists were stunned to realize that this macrostructure was specifically designed to absorb it. The roots were not poisoned by the heavy metals. They were actively feeding on them. through a highly advanced biological process completely alien to modern science. These gargantuan trees utilized a mechanism that scientists can only desperately describe as radiosynthesis. They were somehow pulling deadly nuclear radiation directly from the surrounding subterranean soil, acting as giant biological sponges, and converting the raw destructive energy of decaying radioactive atoms into sustainable biological fuel on a massive macroscopic scale. The international scientific community is currently facing a towering wall of absolute powerlessness. Mainstream biology dictates that nature takes billions of years to slowly evolve even the simplest, most rudimentary defense mechanisms against background radiation, usually resulting only in microscopic extremophiles or highly resilient strains of underground bacteria. There is absolutely no logical explanation, no accepted mathematical model, and no conceivable evolutionary pathway that can account for the sudden, inexplicable appearance of a towering planet-spanning forest engineered specifically to consume weapons-grade nuclear fallout. It is a glaring biological impossibility, a terrifying anomaly that bends the strict foundational rules of physics and biology until they completely break apart. How could an ancient, terrestrial plant naturally evolve the ability to eat the raw, unstable ingredients of an atomic weapon? The leading experts in the field are effectively silenced, completely unable to publish their mind-bending findings in any peer-reviewed journals, and secretly terrified of the paradigm-shifting implications that this discovery brings to light. Because if blind nature did not randomly create these radiation-eating supertrees, then humanity is forced to confront a much darker, much more profound question about our past. To understand the sheer scale of the discovery, geologists initiated a deep-ground sonar mapping sequence, sending acoustic waves radiating across the entire North African continent. The data that bounced back to their monitoring stations was nothing short of apocalyptic. This was not an isolated grove of mutated trees. The fossilized root system extends continuously for thousands upon thousands of miles, stretching from the eastern borders of Egypt all the way to the Atlantic coast of Mauritania. It forms a continuous, interconnected web of biological circuitry, a subterranean megastructure that dwarfs any natural forest currently existing on the surface of the Earth. The sheer volume of radioactive material that this ancient forest must have processed and absorbed over millennia is mathematically incalculable. It suggests an environment that was so heavily contaminated with nuclear radiation that it would have instantly vaporized any normal biological organism. The geologists stared at their monitors in profound disbelief, watching the glowing red lines of the root network map out a subterranean ghost town of epic proportions. They realized they were not just looking at a bizarre paleobotanical anomaly. They were staring directly at the remnants of a planetary defense mechanism, a biological shield that was desperately deployed to save a dying world. But the terrifying revelations did not stop at the biological anomalies of the roots themselves. As independent geologists and rogue archaeologists began to secretly piece together the classified ground-penetrating radar scans, they noticed a disturbing secondary feature surrounding the fossilized forest. Buried just above the root system, perfectly blanketing the ancient soil, lies a massive, continuous layer of fused, translucent green glass. To a layman, this might seem like a natural geological formation, but to any nuclear physicist, this specific type of glass is instantly recognizable and its presence is absolutely horrifying. It is known as trinitite. Trinitite is a radioactive glass residue that is only ever created under one specific set of extreme, unnatural conditions: the immediate detonation of a thermonuclear weapon. When a nuclear bomb explodes, the intense, unimaginable heat, reaching millions of degrees in a fraction of a second, violently melts the surrounding sand and soil, fusing it into this smooth, radioactive glass before it cools. The presence of trinitite is the undeniable fingerprint of a nuclear blast. We have found small, isolated patches of it at the Trinity test site in New Mexico, and scattered across the ruins of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But the layer of glass buried beneath the Sahara Desert does not cover a few square miles. It spans an area larger than the continental United States. The implications of this geological evidence are so profound, so utterly devastating to our established understanding of history, that mainstream academia is paralyzed with fear. The immense heat required to scorch millions of square miles of ancient landscape and melt the bedrock into a continuous sheet of radioactive glass could never be generated by a natural phenomenon. Not a volcanic eruption, not a massive solar flare, and not even a cataclysmic asteroid impact could produce this specific, highly uniform layer of trinitite. It points to an event of organized technological destruction on a planetary scale. It points to a global thermal event. As the undeniable truth of this subterranean nightmare began to leak into the upper echelons of the scientific community, the coordinated cover-up was swift, brutal, and absolute. Military cordons were quietly established across the North African borders. Independent research teams were aggressively defunded, their equipment confiscated under the guise of national security, and their lead researchers threatened with severe espionage charges. The official, heavily sanitized narrative pushed by international authorities is incredibly weak. They claim the region simply houses unstable, naturally occurring uranium deposits that pose a mild environmental hazard. But no natural uranium mine in the history of the Earth has ever perfectly woven itself into a continent-sized biological matrix of petrified wood, nor has it ever been capped by a layer of atomic glass. They are not hiding a geological anomaly. They are actively suppressing the physical remnants of an ancient apocalypse. This desperate suppression has pushed the greatest minds in paleontology and quantum physics to their absolute breaking point. When all natural, evolutionary explanations are systematically exhausted, and when the laws of terrestrial biology are shattered by physical evidence, science is forced to look toward the impossible. If blind nature did not randomly evolve these colossal radiation-eating trees, and if natural disasters do not create continent-wide sheets of weaponized glass, then there is only one chilling logical conclusion left. The super trees were planted. They were intelligently designed, genetically engineered at the molecular level, and deliberately seeded across the scorched earth. But by whom? The timeline of the geological strata places this catastrophic event millions of years before the first primitive human ancestors supposedly learned to walk upright in the African savanna. This leads to a hypothesis so crazy, yet so perfectly aligned with the physical evidence, that it threatens to rewrite the entire history of life on Earth. Long before us, there was another civilization, a precursor race, perhaps early hominids, or an entirely different branch of intelligent life who achieved a level of technological and genetic mastery that we can scarcely comprehend. They built a sprawling global empire, reaching the absolute pinnacle of scientific achievement. But like all great empires, their technological progress vastly outpaced their wisdom. They engaged in a devastating, total global war, unleashing a barrage of thermonuclear weapons so powerful that they literally cracked the planet's crust and turned the vibrant ancient biosphere into a radioactive hellscape. The Sahara Desert is not just a wasteland. It is ground zero of an ancient Armageddon. As their civilization crumbled into radioactive ash and their atmosphere choked on deadly isotopes, their greatest surviving scientists realized that the planet was going to die permanently. In a final desperate act of preservation, they deployed their ultimate biological weapon not to destroy, but to heal. They engineered the seeds of the super trees, biomachines designed specifically to survive the fallout, to aggressively root themselves in the contaminated soil, and to spend the next several million years silently consuming the lethal radiation, slowly scrubbing the earth clean. The terrifying reality is that humanity is not the pinnacle of evolution. We are not the first masters of this world. We are merely the second growth. We are the unintended beneficiaries of an ancient, desperate cleanup operation. We are the survivors, living in the ruins of a forgotten empire, completely unaware that the ground beneath our feet was once sterilized by nuclear fire. Every time we look at the vast, empty expanse of the Sahara Desert, we are not looking at a natural climate shift. We are looking at a colossal graveyard, an ancient battlefield carefully hidden beneath billions of tons of sand. The history we have been taught is a fragile, comforting illusion, a thin layer of dust obscuring a dark and terrifying legacy. If a continent-sized biological radiation scrubber is currently resting beneath the sands of Africa, we must ask ourselves a terrifying question. What other ancient bioengineered fail-safes are silently operating in the deep, unexplored trenches of our oceans, or frozen deep within the ice sheets of Antarctica, desperately working to keep this fragile planet habitable for a species that has forgotten its own past? The universe is vast, cold, and holds secrets that are infinitely more terrifying than we can imagine. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the unknown. If this discovery made you question everything you thought you knew about our history, do not forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and leave a comment down below with your thoughts on the Sahara anomaly. We will see you in the next investigation.